Hey there, Jen.
Happy Pride, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jen. I'm the Public Information Director at DCR.
And I'm Ryan Solis. I'm supervisor over the licensing division at DCR. And here we are in June,
Happy
celebrating Pride
Pride.
Month. Yes. There's so much history here with the LGBTQIA plus community and the development of the cannabis industry here in Los Angeles. So that's one of the things we're talking about today.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that there is such a strong connection between cannabis and the queer community. So we'll be diving into that today. So it is fitting, of course, that we are at Green Qween, and that is Queen with a QW. If you want to look it up, it is at 1051 South Broadway here in downtown LA. And it is a shop that caters to and serves as a safe space for queer communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're actually going to be joined by a couple of guests. We'll be joined by Andrés Rigal. He's a co-founder and co-owner of Green Qween. And we'll also have their chief executive officer, Alexis Areias, join us as well to talk about the legacy of the LGBTQIA plus community on cannabis legalization here in Los Angeles.
Yeah. And we will also be discussing the recent rescheduling order from April and just what it means for Los Angeles, what it means for California, and also what it means for your taxes. So we'll have Chris Hickok from Hickok and Kim Law Firm and Ani Galyan to talk about tax from Galyan Law.
Yep, that's going to be a super useful discussion. There's already a lot of questions coming our way, so they'll be able to provide a lot of great insight on that. And before we jump into that conversation, I did want to give a reminder to our operators here in Los Angeles of our 2027 renewal cycle that's coming up in September. We're trying to stay ahead of it. I know it might seem early, but there are some deadlines and things that need to be done that are going to take some time. So please take a look at that as soon as you can.
All right, with that, let's jump in.
Let's do it.
Happy Pride Month. It is June. Thank you so much for being here with us and for lending us your space. I'm with Alexis and Andrés.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. I'm definitely feeling super gay this month, but I mean, we are gay all day and queer all year here at Green Qween. But it's really nice to meet you. I'm the co-owner and co-founder of Green Qween.
Yes, and thank you so much again for having us on the show. We're really excited to have you in the space. I am the CEO of Green Qween. I've been with the company since 2024 and really excited to chat with you a little bit more about our brand.
Pride and cannabis.
Right? Exactly. All the good stuff.
Yes, exactly. Again, thank you so much for lending us your beautiful space. We've been here a few times, DCR. And I remember one of the stories that we've always talked about before was this disco ball that we can all see in the back. And I remember Andrés talking about how you had to take down the door to fit it in because you bought it and you didn't realize that it wasn't going to fit in.
Like, it's like, have you ever gone shopping for furniture and you're just like, that'll fit?
Yeah.
And then the delivery people get here and then you look at the couch and then the stairs and you're like, how is it going to happen? It was very much like one of those moments where you see someone a crane with a piano going through a window.
Yes.
But no, when the disco ball got here, we had the store pretty much finished and we were feeling really happy about that. And then the ball arrived and we just stood out there for 10 minutes kind of
how are we going to get it in?
Literally. So we had to remove the entire door frame and everything and cover it in lube and then just push it right in.
But I think that talks a lot about your commitment to the store and the space and making it, what you want it to be.
Yeah. I feel like, living with intention is really important and follow through. I really wanted it to be a space that you walk into and it feels interesting and inspiring and queer. Yeah. And so with the disco ball, it's something I knew I had to have. It just made sense for me because of my background in nightlife. And the disco ball really serves as kind of like a altarpiece in all queer spaces, going all the way back to the early days of just any room where you're just dancing and representing yourself. So every Green Qween has a disco ball.
I love that. And that talks a lot about your commitment to the dispensary, to the space. This is not just a dispensary. It's a lot more than that. Where did the idea for this come from? Where'd you get the inspiration?
I knew that it had to be a space that represented queer people authentically and gave people space. And then the more research I did, I didn't realize that, the modern cannabis industry as we know it today was was born out of queer people in San Francisco. So that just kind of further reinforced the idea that like we had to make this queer, and that's kind of like how we got started.
And, you know, obviously this space, you've made a point to cater to queer people. Why do you think that now in 2026, it's still important to have these kinds of spaces for, you know, these communities?
Absolutely. Sure. I mean, you know, as this industry has progressed and we've come to the place that we are now, we've seen our community really pushed out of the industry. And so, you know, to be able to reclaim that space and I mean, just queer spaces generally, I think are under attack right now across the country and across the world. And so to have that role in creating spaces where people feel comfortable, where they feel welcomed, where they know they can show up and just be themselves is really, really important. You know, so much of the queer experience is finding your chosen family and finding community in space that accepts you for who you are, you know, no judgments, no questions asked. And so to be able to have the opportunity to create that in an industry that, you know, so many people deem as like cannabro and very honestly straight and white,
Yes.
it's really empowering. And I think it's really important. We've made so many deep relationships in this community across Los Angeles and beyond, with different, you know, community partnerships. And it has been just an incredibly fulfilling and meaningful experience to be a part of. So
Absolutely. And the thing is that, you know, when you walk into a Green Qween, everyone is welcome. And you won't find like rainbows in our stores or anything. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like, you know, it's a space that welcomes everyone in. If you look hard enough, you will see Easter eggs of queerness. And like to Alexis's point, you know, our community is constantly under attack, especially these days. So having a space that not only welcomes but showcases queer people is very important, especially in an industry that we had a hand in creating and that we've been pushed out of. So it's very much, we're not here to create space, we're here to reclaim space.
And I'll just add one last thing, if that's all right. You know, one of the biggest barriers to entry in the cannabis industry is shelf space. If you are a smaller brand that, you know, isn't part of a large distribution network, doesn't have the kind of funding available to have a lot of sales reps that can, you know, go to these shops and negotiate to get your product on their shelves, it's a lot harder to get in front of consumers. And so one of the things that, you know, we like to say is that we will grab and accept any queer-owned brand that we can get our hands on. It doesn't just stop at queer brands. It's, you know, BIPOC owned. It's you know, we really just want to uplift these smaller impact brands that might not have the opportunity in some of these large scale dispensaries. So that's really core to our mission in creating that space as well.
Wow. You know, that's something that not a lot of people talk about. It's the actual like lack of shelf space, because I guess a lot of people want to, you know, go with the big brands that they know, right? So it is hard if you're a smaller mom and pop owned brand to enter dispensaries like this.
Absolutely.
And that's true even in the retail side. You know, it's just like, I see it across the entire industry. It's hard for mom and pop brands and also hard for mom and pop dispensaries, you know, because the barrier of entry is just almost impossible. For so many reasons. And so we are very aware of the gift we've been given, and we every day want to give back, you know, to not only give them an opportunity, but create a foundation and a road so hopefully more marginalized and queer or BIPOC dispensaries can open and more brands can open. And these brands grow, like in a way, like I feel like we're almost like a greenhouse, you know, I know like play on words, but it's like we are growing people and brands and culture within our walls, because the opportunity we've been given, we want to use that energy to really push it back into the industry.
Yeah. I want to go back to a point that you both made earlier on, and that was the start of cannabis here in the state of California. this is the 30th anniversary of the 1996 Prop 215 Compassionate Use Act. And a lot of people don't know that that was really the brainchild of Dennis Perron, who was a queer activist in the San Francisco scene. And he authored this bill along with, a few other people, of course. But it was in response to seeing the queer community suffering from during the AIDS crisis. And they used to take it to alleviate pain and encourage appetite and just feel more comfortable. So where do you guys think that cannabis legalization would be now if it wasn't for these queer activists in the 90s really working to push Prop 215 forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dennis was definitely ahead of his time. He lost his partner to AIDS and, was someone who was selling marijuana in the 1970s and was arrested multiple times. And I think that it was through the pain and that loss that he witnessed through, within our community that he really became an advocate. He started the first Cannabis Buyers Club, which was, for all intents and purposes, like one of the first medical cannabis dispensaries. And so I think he often used to say that, all cannabis use is medical, and that kind of philosophy was really ahead of its time. And so in so many ways, that 96 proposition, every cannabis dispensary that we see in California and really across the country can trace its roots back to Dennis and his work. And so I don't think that we would be where we are today. Legislation takes a long time, and it really is through that work that we are able to be where we are today. And so we have a lot of gratitude and respect for everything that, our forefathers and mothers did before us. So
Absolutely. The thing with the queer community is that we come into this world and we have to fight for everything.
Yes.
From the moment we're born and the families we're in, to the schools we go to the streets we land on, and all of our rights, every single right that we have today, we had to march in the streets for, and we continue to do it. And even today, they're trying to be taken away. And cannabis is one of those things, and it was born out of a lot of pain. But the great thing about the queer community is that we're able to synthesize that pain into action and energy. And it's funny, like a lot of people, even queer people, don't know that story. They don't know the story that cannabis was born out of that through Dennis Perron and everything that happened in San Francisco and the AIDS crisis. A lot of the reason is because we lost an entire generation to AIDS. And so with queer people, we don't have like queer schools or books or anything that teach our youth where we came from. I didn't even know the story, to be honest. And so with Green Qween, when we created it, I knew that we had to continue that torch and tell that story and live that story and build that story. And it's what gives me so much purpose and forces me to push forward every day through what is a very difficult and industry to navigate, especially lately. But I don't think that the cannabis industry would exist today in the way it is. And even before we got here, I would go to different conventions and whatnot, and I saw zero, even the biggest ones, like in Vegas, like I saw zero queer representation at these industries. And it just made me even more like, I was like, we need to do this. We have to make this work, And these queer dispensaries, these straight dispensaries, they'll show up for Pride Month, you know what I mean? Or brands, they'll put out some rainbow pre-rolls. They'll slap a sticker on a window. But and I appreciate that, the representation is appreciated, but where are you the other 11 months of the year? And how is that really helping our community? With Green Qween, we give back a percentage of our our proceeds, with Downtown LA, we gave a $20,000 check to our community partner, DTLA Proud, to help fund their festival and their queer youth center. So it's just kind of like, it's honoring our past and realizing where we came from, but also we need to continue moving forward, because if we don't continue with the intention and of what Dennis Perone was doing, then it just stops, right? So we just need to keep going and hoping and inspiring other queer brands to do the same.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much again for letting us use your space, and for being leaders in the community, and, for opening spaces like this so that everyone, can feel welcome. Thank you both.
Thank
Of
you.
course.
Thank you for having us.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We're still here at Green Qween, and we had a great commemoration of Pride Month. Now we're going to kind of switch up and go to the legal matters regarding the rescheduling of medical cannabis. So I'm here joined by two guests. We have Chris Hickok and Ani Galyan. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, both of you. I want to start us off by giving a little bit of an introduction from both of you on your specialization in cannabis law. So maybe Ani, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. So my background is a CPA and a certified tax specialist with the state bar. So I'm an attorney, just working in the tax world, and since 2013, I've been managing and advising clients on tax matters having to do in the cannabis space. So we've gone through the illicit market to coming into regulated market and now into rescheduling.
Awesome. Thank you. And Chris, how about you?
Yeah, so I started in the legal industry in 2016 in cannabis. So we were transitioning a lot of clients from the cooperative nonprofit model into a for-profit system where they're regulated, licensed. From there, we've kind of transitioned into helping clients build their businesses, their portfolios, intellectual property. Through that, we've helped start doing estate planning. And then really from that, anything that a cannabis client needs. I mean, we've done employment issue, landlord-tenant, dog bite cases. So kind of whatever people come to us, we try and help them out with where we can.
Perfect. Well, that's great for our viewers. We've got two great attorneys here to kind of help us through some confusing potentially stuff. So I'm glad we have you guys here. Thanks for joining us again. Keeping in mind that our viewers may not follow this stuff super closely, I wanted to get an overview, maybe Chris, this is for you, of what the rescheduling of medical cannabis means, and maybe we can differentiate here between the recreational and the medical use.
Yeah, so prior to April, there was essentially two types of cannabis, hemp and Schedule I cannabis, meaning that it had a high propensity for abuse and low medical value. I think, although most users would say otherwise, that was what the federal government's position was. With the AG order, it turned state licensed medical cannabis into Schedule III, along with FDA approved products. So adult use and synthetic derived THC is still Schedule I, and hemp is in its own lane with hemp as of now.
Perfect. And that's a good overview of federal, and then kind of transitioning that into and sticking with you, Chris. Now we've talked a little bit about federal. What do you think this might mean for like our California operators at the state level?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of taken a wait and see approach. In a state like Oklahoma or Florida where it's all medical, it makes sense for everyone to register and be a part of that system. But in California, there's an adult use and medical system. And part of the application when you apply for this registration on the federal level, it asks, will your business continue to sell a Schedule I drug? And a lot of the experts and lawyers that I've spoken to don't really feel that if you answer yes to that question, that they're going to give you a registration. You can imagine a situation where a manufacturer is making Tylenol with codeine, which is also a Schedule III drug, but in the back hallways, they're making cocaine. The DEA would have an issue with that. And, in fact, cocaine's a Schedule II drug. So if you're in one hand making a Schedule III drug in the front, but, producing Schedule I drugs in the back, I don't see them being good with that. So if you are adult use and medical, I don't see it being helpful. So you would have to probably be only medical, which in California is just not an ideal business model as of now.
Yeah, absolutely. You're hitting on a lot of the good aspects here. And I'm just wondering, there's so many technical pieces of this, I think, different aspects that our operators have to consider when they make like business decisions for themselves. And so I'm wondering, I know like we're starting to get some questions at DCR from folks I'm wondering, I'll stick with you again, Chris. I'm going to get to you, Ani. Wondering what kinds of questions or conversations that, you're having with your clients related to this at all. If there's anything in specific you're seeing or patterns, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, the first piece is like you have to make a decision soon because they gave you 60 days to register, which comes up June 26th, I believe. I don't think this is going to be the only registration, but it might be the quickest, cheapest path forward. So I have some clients that aren't deciding to register at all. I have some that are applying for the registration, paying the initial application fee, and then before they're issued the license, just waiting to kind of see what the situation looks like, how it's being operated, how it's being enforced. And then I have some clients that are transitioning into directly medical and applying only. So it really varies on a client by client basis. One of the bigger issues that I think most of my clients were interested about was import and export, because the AG order discusses that there's going to be an ability to import and export. But you take it from a state law perspective, which is the whole reason you're getting this registration in the first place. State law specifically prohibits using airways or waterways to transport cannabis. So you would need a complete overhaul, I think, of our system, right? Like, how do you transition? How do you connect a state licensed metric California producer with an Oregon producer who has their own state licensing system, or Nevada has their own licensing system? Or do you have a state like Nevada who maybe is like, well, we don't want to get California weed coming in here because we want to protect our people, so we're going to ban imports into our space. And then you have places like Idaho where it's completely banned. And so if you're driving through Idaho to transport your cannabis, does a police officer there recognize the federal registration? Do they know how to verify that? Does an Oregon police officer know how to verify a California operator? So there's so many additional issues that need to be kind of fleshed out and figured out before I think we even get to that point. But I've been trying to get clients to start with either like a GMP certification or something akin to that, because a lot of like international businesses require GMP certification to be able to sell and transport products. So it is the future, in my opinion. Like, those are the steps you have to take, and starting with some sort of certification, really getting your SOPs, record keeping up to date is going to help that process along.
Perfect. Yeah, I think you're totally hitting the nail on the head with that. I wanted to just kind of follow up with two questions there. If you know roughly the cost that it's going to take to apply and register with the DEA, and then if you can think of or what you might have been hearing on any of the operational challenges once you are actually registered with the DEA, what that might look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it looks to be it's about $800 for the application fee, along with the time and effort it takes to put that together. They said that it's an expedited process, so it's supposed to take within 6 months that they're going to give an answer for you. And then once you get approved, it's anywhere between about $1,000 to $4,000 depending on your license type. And then once you register, the way that it's laid out in the AG order, and then because of the lack of information we have, we have little to glean from about how all it will work. But what the DEA has set up is basically a nominal buyback provision, where basically everything you want to sell, you have to sell to the DEA. They sell it back to you at the same nominal price with a convenience fee. So that's how they're going to get their dollar amounts. And during that time, the product has to be held in a facility that they have access to at all times, that they can inspect and review the product. And then on top of that, there's also quota requirements. They don't really discuss what that means. So that might be another reason why you want to register now, is that if they get too many people registering and then you try to register, they may say, hey, we have too much cannabis in America, so we're going to shut you down or maybe limit your growth. A lot of that's kind of unknown, but I definitely think that anyone who is in this space who has a license should read the AG order. It's only 33 pages, and I just think it's super important to just be knowledgeable about what's going on and what the future is looking like for all of us.
I did want to add on to that response a little bit on if you have information about what exactly the DCC and how the order involves them in kind of this process.
Yeah, so they've created an expedited process to allow any operator to switch their designation from adult use and medical to just medical, or back and forth, which would allow maybe more availability for registrants. They've also created this system for retailers to bifurcate their license by creating a new company. Then that company is sold as just medical, and then your other licensed company would be adult use. And so that would give a retailer the potential ability to register just the medical company on the federal level.
I do have a question for you now, Ani. Many of our businesses have been waiting for tax relief, when they file their federal tax returns. So if you wouldn't mind spending a little bit of time talking about, kind of how the cannabis operators have been treated differently than pretty much every other business when it comes to their federal tax returns.
So even though it's a regulated market here in California on the federal level, this is still a Schedule 1 substance. And under the Internal Revenue Code 280E, this is treated as an illicit market and illicit business where you are not allowed to take a tax deduction for your expenses. So to break it down to the most basic term, they treat cannabis operators as drug dealers. And they don't think it's right that drug dealers should be able to take a deduction for rent and salaries and insurance. And of course, that's starting to change. We are not in that space. But this Section 280E has been in the book since the 1980s. Okay.
Wow.
And it was in response to a drug dealing case where the tax court did allow for the operator to take deductions. And Congress said, no, that shouldn't be the case. You should be taxed on the income you earn, but you shouldn't be able to take a deduction for the expenses you use to generate that income, with the exception of cost of goods sold, as we know, right? So if you had to buy a product to be able to sell that product, or you had to pay expenses to produce a product, those expenses will be deductible. But operators are burdened with this tax on phantom income. And so what happens if you don't have the proper structure, then you are personally liable for some of the tax that you're picking up on this phantom income. And we're starting to see this more of an issue for operators who were not properly structured to begin with. And with rescheduling, that's also going to create more issues. So that's kind of a nutshell of the tax problems we have at the federal level.
Phantom income, that's an interesting term there. Would you mind, just for our viewers, explaining a little bit more on what exactly that means?
Sure. So don't want to get too technical here, but just think of it this way. If you're selling a product for $100, you get $100 gross income, and you spend $20 to buy the product, that leaves you $80 to pay for your expenses. A regular business would be able to pay for their security, for their salaries, for their insurance, which will leave them like $10 to pay tax on. In the cannabis space, you have to pay tax on the $80. So you don't get to take those tax deductions to bring your income to what is truly left in your pocket. And you're paying tax on essentially income that doesn't exist. In California, we resolved this problem because we've gotten away and said 280E no longer applies. But at the federal level, operators are still stuck with this. If you come under the order, which is the state licensed medical operator, and you meet all the requirements, then you're not subject to 280E anymore. However, recreational operators still will have to pay tax on what I call phantom income.
Perfect. Yeah. And hey, I'm learning some new terms here with phantom income. Appreciate that. And I think for the viewers, 280E, that's the big takeaway there. To follow up on that though, and kind of connect to the conversation we're having with Chris, how might this executive order kind of change or impact any of the things that you just talked about, even maybe related to, how the IRS might handle things?
Sure. So there's the law, and then there's reality of what operators have been doing and what advisors have been advising cannabis operators, that whether 280E applies or not, there are some challenges right now in tax court. There's also a current case where the Department of Justice just filed a lawsuit to claw back money that was claimed on an amended return for a position regarding 280E. So there's a lot of moving parts here with regards to taxes. With rescheduling, I was just in Washington, D.C., and I met with the IRS, and they are actively working on guidance on how the rescheduling will apply. The issue for California operators is that we're medical and adult use. But in reality, operators are not separating their operations between medical and adult. So tracking expenses is going to be very difficult. What expenses are allocated to medical and what sales are generated for medical versus adult. So that's the challenge we have in California. And as Chris mentioned, it's not practical business model to start separating now, particularly if you are in the metric system and you're going to be tracked everything as medical, then you're going to have medical cannabis sitting at the dispensary with nobody buying. So that's going to be the issue, right? And so we're working with operators to find strategic solutions on how rescheduling will apply, and waiting for the IRS guidance to see how that will also play into it. Also, there's a big tax court case that we're waiting for on the decision whether 280E should even apply at all to the cannabis market.
Okay. Wow. A lot of great information there. And I think something that you maybe started to touch on there was in that order, there's also information from the Department of Treasury that's talking about potentially like some retrospective tax relief. Is there any information that you have on that you can share with our viewers?
Unfortunately, the IRS was very tight-lipped on what their plans were. There is going to be some retroactive because there is uncollectible amounts that are sitting in the government books. There's no way that the government's going to be able to collect. So in wasting resources and administrative power to try to collect money that doesn't exist is a waste of taxpayers' dollars. And so providing retroactive relief is very important. Also, there is a nuance in the compromise of the IRS that I'm actually challenging in the Ninth Circuit right now. It's a tax court case that me and a colleague are challenging. We just filed our briefs. And this will allow operators to compromise their liabilities in an offer and compromise situation. So we're also looking for the IRS for some guidance on how that will apply for operators with historical tax debt on the books.
It's fantastic. This is a lot of great information. I'm learning. Hopefully, viewers, you guys are paying attention. This is a lot of information. Ani, clearly you're on top of it. So really appreciate you sharing.
A question, right?
Of course.
So, it's kind of my understanding that in order to get some of the tax deductions from a medical side, right? Because the AG order does say specifically that just simply being a medical license, you are now free from 280E. Do you have to be able to prove from seed to sale that your medical cannabis was medical throughout the whole supply chain all the way to the customer? Because like in California, right, you can be a medical cultivator that goes to adult use distributor who then sells it to a manufacturer who maybe makes some tinctures or for medical patients and then, dabs or whatever. Do you have to be able to prove all the way through the supply chain that it's been medical in order to get the benefit?
Sure. So that's a great question. We don't have the answer to that, and that's where we're waiting for the IRS to come into play because the order just says if you're state licensed. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say what type of activities you need to be conducting under that license, right? And so when we have IRS audits, it's very common for the auditor to walk through and look at what you're doing, take the square footage, walk into the rooms, get an understanding of your operations, because in a producer market, which is the cultivator, the manufacturer, and some distributors, your cost of goods sold is allocated much higher. And so they want to get an understanding of what portion of your room is being used to produce versus for selling activities. And we would think that it would be some type of a analysis of that sort, where we're looking at operations of trying to bifurcate what are you operating under adult market or adult license, or what are you operating under the medical license. I would take some approach to that, but we're hoping the IRS will come in to provide some guidance. Also, you're going to touch on this. We have a hearing coming up regarding the recreational market, and hopefully that'll also shine light. In practice, now I don't file tax returns, but in practice, some operators have taken the position already that 280E doesn't apply, and they're not even allocating and accounting for it on their tax returns. That's why we're seeing higher number of audits from the IRS in this area. So they have their formulas. They're able to identify who has been grossly overstating their cost of goods sold based on the market or the type of operations they're involved in, right? So this is a gray area, and even the CPAs and the tax attorneys out there will give you 5 different answers if you have 5 people.
Well, in law school, they tell you the answer to everything is it depends.
Yes.
So, we'll figure it out.
I appreciate you jumping in there, Chris, with a follow-up for Ani. I'm gonna send something your way again, Chris. If you could mind talking about a little bit on how the DEA, how they're involved in kind of this legal medical cannabis market related to all of this.
I mean, they've been prosecuting this industry for a long time now. 1970s CSA was brought in, but basically Donald Trump signed an executive order and wanted something to be done, and so the AG order put this. The AG put this out. If we all flash back to 2017 when the then BCC dropped their regulations, right? It was about 300 pages. of guidance on how product moves from seed to sale, from nursery to cultivator to manufacturer, distributor, right? And even to this day, every couple months, there's changes to it, right? Because they're still trying to figure this out and do this. And we got 33 pages from the AG to try and figure out how to regulate, this mishmash of 40 different states of some combination of adult use, medical, different structures of how they license, how they provide patients access to cannabis. So I think we're just scratching the surface of what this is. There's also a handful of challenges being pushed forth, challenged on the basis of good access to cannabis. There's one company that has been in the process of getting an FDA approved product for about 7 years, and so they feel like they've been harmed because now, with the snap of a finger, if you're a medical license holder, you are now DEA registered. SAM, Safe Americans, Safe Access to Marijuana. They're also putting forth a challenge. So, whether this stands the test of time, we'll find out. I don't think that necessarily how it's laid out now will be its final iteration. So I think it's important, especially if you're in California, to just be able to try and read the tea leaves, have meetings with your team, with your supply chain, understand really what everyone is doing, and just try to come up with the best answer possible. The DCC also has a public comment, and they're asking for your advice and your questions, and they're trying to get information from us too. So they haven't really given us a solid foothold of where things stand for us either.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. Just gathering all the information you can. Hey, whether it's you're listening into this podcast, I think that's a good start, and just with all the different agencies. It's a lot of good information, and I think, like Ani mentioned not too long ago, so another place you can get some good information is later this month at the hearing scheduled for June 29th to potentially consider rescheduling of all cannabis. So, question for both you guys, and we'll start with Ani. What you might think, or what our viewers could realistically expect to come from that hearing, and kind of what might trickle down after that hearing.
So this morning I was actually looking up to see if the guest list of who will be testifying was public, right? So you can expect the anti-cannabis market to be there, the normal to be there, or lobbyists to be there for the different industries, arguing their points. Our hope is that they streamline and make sure that they don't ignore the recreational market, and they don't ignore the blue states or punish the blue states for being in the recreational market, right? Because that is going to hinder operations. As we're talking about, the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan for some of these operators, cross-border transactions, whether it's international or state to state, you want to be in the overall federal regulated market. And I hope that with the hearings, and the next step would be to allow that space for the regulated market to move forward, both on the recreational and the medical. Whether it's taxes, whether it's registration, whether it's access to safe cannabis, all aboard.
That's great. Chris, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people in this community would love a descheduling of cannabis, right? And getting people out of prison that are in there for nonviolent crimes. Unfortunately, this meeting has tried to happen in the past, and it got terminated because of who was on the guest list, who wasn't on the guest list. So it's challenged quite often. There's also the House Appropriations didn't allow for funding of DEA's use in rescheduling. So whether or not they can do anything about it in 2027 is unknown. So it's a hopeful step forward, but it's also I don't have high hopes that it'll just be descheduled unless the war in Iran or something, it goes really bad. Would be my personal opinion, and not the opinions of DCR.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe it's more of a fingers crossed than it is holding your breath. So
yeah.
Perfect.
With this administration, I just don't know what we can expect and when we can expect it. So we may wake up on August 1st and we may have an order, or we may never hear again. So you just don't know.
Got it. Yeah, we'll stay tuned, and we'll continue to stay up to date on what happens at the hearing, and kind of afterwards, and follow suit from there. You guys have graciously answered all my questions. I kind of wanted to give you both an opportunity if there's anything else that maybe we didn't have a chance to touch on that you wanted to touch on. Otherwise, like I said, you've answered all my questions. So, Ani, was there maybe anything else, a final word?
Sure. What I tell my clients is right now it's cleanup time for your taxes. Right now it's time to get everything in order, because we're looking at a 5-year plan. Is it time to cash out? Is it time to get your valuation up? And your taxes that are on the books are hindering you. So making sure whether it's the city, right, the city of LA or the local jurisdiction you're operating in, you're in compliance, you're filing, you're paying with the CDTFA, making sure you don't have any payroll tax liability issues on the books, and cleaning everything up so that if there's any retroactive relief, if there's any amnesty program, any streamline program. I proposed a streamline program to the IRS while I was in Washington, D.C., and part of it is making sure that all your other taxes are cleaned up so that you're demonstrating the hindrance of this phantom income tax is going to stop you from entering the market. And so we're hoping that clients are listening and they're starting to move forward in coming into the market and being a good tax-paying citizens.
Perfect. Thank you. Chris, any final words for our viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to reiterate that you really got to speak with your team, your board, your officers, your lawyers, your consultants, and really understand this thing in and out. If you like to play Monopoly, right? Like the people who win at Monopoly are the people that know the rules to the game. And if you don't know how to upgrade an apartment to a house, how to leverage your property, you're not going to win that. And I think it's super important to understand different perspectives too. Because I have different interpretations of how I read this AG order versus other consultants, versus other lawyers. And so it's important to get as much information as possible. And I think one of the key takeaways for me from the AG order, which we didn't really step on, is near the end. It's like page 27 to 29, and it lays out definitional aspects of the law. And it says specifically that once you're a registrant distributor or registered manufacturer can only sell to another registered distributor who could only sell to a registered manufacturer, or a registered dispensary who could then only sell to a patient. And why that's important is, to me, the language that they specifically chose means that they've created this closed system of once you register, you can only work within that registered system. So if you go and register as a cultivator, but the people who buy your product or the manufacturer who turns your fresh frozen into oil doesn't register, you arguably can't sell to them. And so, like, how does that affect your supply chain? How does that affect your whole entire business? So it's super important that you're really communicating not just with your own team, but with outside counsel and your supply chain as well.
Perfect. Yeah, stay informed and continue to communicate, for sure. Really good advice. I want to just thank you both for taking your time today to join us. I know the viewers really appreciate it. This was super educational. There's very technical aspects here, and while we don't have all the answers, you guys have provided some great insight. So thank you very much, both of you, for your time today.
Yeah, no
Thanks
problem.
for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you to our guests for being with us today and for giving us their time. Chris, Ani, Alexis, and Andrés. Again, we're here at Green Qween, located at 1051 South Broadway Street in downtown LA.
Yes, thank you very much. That was a lot of great information for our viewers, so we greatly appreciate it. And one final send-off I mentioned off the top, our 2027 renewal cycle for DCR is upcoming in September, so please take a look at our website. Stay tuned on that, and keep an eye on your email inbox for any updates.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.